Hello. As you can probably guess, this is not the Truepenny Show. This is in fact an old format we used to use called Telling Stories. I'm returning to this show for a special reason. Meiko Satomura, the greatest professional wrestler in the world today, in my humble opinion, is retiring in March. And I thought it would be a good idea to bring back the Telling Stories series and look at my series of articles that I wrote for Wrestle Talk TV back, around about 12 years ago. This is a very long time ago now. It was called Red Dawn, and it showed the growth of Meiko Satomura from her rookie years all the way through to her being the top of Joshi just before BritWres kind of rediscovered her and brought her to the UK, which started her rise to fame and her run in WWE NXT. I wrote articles about her for Fighting Spirit magazine as well as Wrestle Talk TV, and one coincided with a big show that Pro Wrestling Eve did, which was Meiko Satomura's debut. So I hope you enjoy Red Dawn. This is the first part of the series, and hopefully I will eventually get all of the series recorded for you to listen to. But we start with the debut of Meiko Satomura. Yesterday's Heroes. The Meiko Satomura Story. Part 1. Red Dawn. As a writer, you may have noticed, I find brevity difficult. However, one great piece of sports journalism from the 70s stuck with me, and perhaps it should be a warning for when I get too wordy. The great motorcycle news journalist Mike Scott was asked to cover the return of Mike Hailwood to the Isle of Man TT in 1978. His piece was to the point. Mike Hailwood will return to the TT after 11 years away from motorcycle racing. He will win. Sadly, the editor at the time wouldn't let him run it. That is what I would like to do with this piece. And in my heart of hearts, this article would read, Meiko Satomura is the greatest professional wrestler in the world today. I would then leave you to go and find out for yourselves all that she's accomplished, and she has accomplished a lot. She is a fearless wrestler, innovative promoter, tireless trainer, and an impassioned promo. She is the complete package. Her heritage is a long line of wrestlers who she has divined into one perfect fighting ideal. By the way, Hailwood won. Think of all the wrestlers you have seen or heard of during the Monday Night Wars. How many of them are still relevant? How many are still working for a larger wrestling company? How many hold major titles? 1. Meiko Satomura. She's been around for an incredibly long period of time, and for a lot of that time she has been in or around the main event of any promotions she has worked for, including WCW. She now stands atop of the women's wrestling world as the Wonder of Stardom champion, a belt that has grown in prestige over the last few years, in part and incredibly down to the work of Satomura, even though she doesn't even work for World Wonder Ring Stardom, and has never been champion before. She is the benchmark by which all other Joshi are measured, a level of intensity and realism that is one step above anyone else working anywhere today. She represents a whole lineage and style of wrestling that grew out of the arena-filling excesses of All Japan Women in the 80s and GAEA in the 90s. Her devotion to the sport professional wrestling is second to none, and her story begins in a warehouse, next to some fields, in rural Japan, at the GAEA Dojo, in 1995. Jigosu Nagayo was one half of the most over tag teams you will ever see, the Crush Gals. The Crush Gals dominated the AJW main event from 1986 onwards. Herself and Lioness Asuka were not just over as a tag team, they redefined what over meant for women's wrestling. While the beauty pair in the 70s had been the first crest of AJW's mass populism, the Crush Gals pushed the boundaries of what was possible for a female wrestling star. A hit in the ring, as well as being hugely charismatic, they could both wrestle a streak. Their short-haired, all-business look endeared them to their teenage girl fanbase, an attainable ideal. Add in the perfect heel opponents in Dump Matsumoto and Bull Nakano, and you had a rare trifecta of rating success, a live-drawing powerhouse, and artistically satisfying matches. However, all of this came to an abrupt halt when in 1990 Asuka and Nagayo reached 26 years of age. the mandatory retirement point for any AJW wrestler. The Crush Girls had broken up to pursue solo careers by that point, with great artistic and financial success. However, there was more to come from Nagayo. She simply couldn't leave wrestling alone. She became one of AJW's colour commentators, as the next crop of young stars worked their way up the ladder, and brought new heights to the wrestling landscape. But when Masahito Yamamoto founded JWP in 1992, there was suddenly an opening for older Joshi stars. Homegrown JWP stars like Dynamite Kansai and QT Suzuki would become huge draws in their own right, so maybe another promotion could work. When JWP split into JWP and LLPW, and then FMW began to put together a women's roster to rival the monolithic juggernaut of AJW, it proved there was room for more than one company at the top of the Joshi tree. In 1995, GAEA was born, Nagayo's own promotion, which featured herself as top star, some imports from AJW and JWP on a loan basis. She tagged with Dynamite Kansai on GAEA's first show, First Gong at Kurikan Hall. It was an artistic smash hit. Bringing a tougher edge to AJW's pure science aesthetic, it was far enough away from the established brand's ideas to be considered new, and familiar enough to gain trusted support. What Nagayo knew, though, was that she could not rely on some veterans and freelancers. Her dojo had to be top-notch. After all, that is what you kept AJW on top all those years. She started auditions not long after the promotion found its feet. Satmoura would be one of the first students, making her debut in 1995 against fellow GAEA trainee Sonoko Kato. Was also still active in Oz Academy as one of its main event draws. Making the starts in the traditional arena swimsuit, blue for Kato, red for Satomura, both colours would stick with them throughout their careers. They look apprehensive, as you would expect if a legend like Nagayo was watching your every move and you are making your debut at a TV taping in front of the incredibly knowledgeable Kurikan Hall crowd. While they both looked every inch the mild-mannered rookies at the opening of the match, Satomura made herself stand out. She was on the offensive early, smashing forearms into Kato after a rope break, whipping her and then pulling her up short to deliver a chop to the chest. That trademark GAEA aggression showed early. She followed that up with a series of dangerous-looking drop kicks on her kneeling opponent. They were delivered with power and accuracy. Kato recovered and tried to bulldog Satomura into submission. Kato's visible bruises show how hard their training had been, as she looked for a cross arm breaker to seal the victory. And screaming like a banshee, she delivered a series of shoulder tackles to take advantage. Kato ducked the last one, but after some more move and counter move, it was Satomura who picked up the victory, with a cross arm breaker of her own. When it debuted on GAEA TV, Satomura was accompanied by Nagayo to deliver colour commentary on her own match. Nagayo found herself a star. After the match, she had an odd look on her face, partly disbelief that she could throw so much energy into a match, and also a resolute satisfaction, as if it could be any other way. She would become a regular partner of Nagayo over the next year. She would also be a principal character in the rise of GAEA, as a strong promotion, making guest appearances for AJW, JWP, and Big Japan in 1996, representing the brand to other promotions. Her first major championship victory came in September of 95 with the victory of her team in the GAEA Splash and J and Running G tournament at Kurikan Hall, partnered with Kaoru Maeda and Tomoko Kazumi, better known as Azumi Hyuga. They would enter the tournament at K-Hall. Kaoru was a freelance veteran who joined GAEA to give it some gravitas, still the owner of the most picture-perfect moonsault in wrestling at the age of 46. She led her rookies to an overall tournament victory in front of 2,300 fans, and on the fledgling GAEA TV, which now carries more wrestling than most post-networks aside from Samurai. It was a good showing for a pair of rookies, and showed how much belief Nagayo had in them. As 1995 moved on, the big matches continued to add up for Satomura. She would defend GAEA honor at their Christmas event,
the wonderfully named Come On Hurry Christmas Fighting.
She would tag with Kaoru and fellow rookie Toshi Uematsu to defeat Kaori Nakayama, Yukari Ishikura, and Megumi Kudo, FMW's top scientific gun. These were important matches for both companies. They were both trying to forge an identity, and the dream match scenarios they were prized by the promoters. In fact, it would be a co-promotion that would be the standout work for GAEA in the coming 12 months. She wrestled with Chigusa Nagayo in a very real personal feud with Combat Toyota, as FMW paid a visit to GAEA in March of '96. Hanging out in the main event with these superstars did Satomura's poise and timing the world of good. She may have had an advantage with a new company.
GAEA's roster was obviously awfully thin,
but she surely took hold of it with both hands firmly. It would pay off in May as she had won the Hustling Cup, a GAEA 3-round tournament, taking the honours in Kawasaki over Sonoka Kato. However, 1 week later, her first visit to AJW would be less than unsuccessful, as she would tag with Rei Tamada to lose in the
AJW Junior All-Stars Tag Team Tournament.
Losses, though, were few and far between. Satomura had avoided the usual pitfalls of being a swimsuited rookie, losing a lot and being on the receiving end of a harsh beatings from the veterans. The matches were long and quite often meant something in the wider picture of the company. Along with Keiru, Uematsu and Kato, she was the rising star, homegrown GAEA through and through. She still had a doe-eyed rookie appeal, but was actually getting to be very good very quickly. GAEA began a long-form push behind Satomura in the summer of '96. She won a 2-on-1 handicap match against Meiko Matsumoto and Rina Ishii, and despite losing a tag team tournament final with her now regular partner Sonoka Kato, she would have a strong winning streak going into the crowning of GAEA's first tag team champions. The AAAW Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championship was a badly named title. It would just be the AAW Tag Team Championship from 1998 onwards, as heavier wrestlers vied for it. However, the first champions would be Satomura and Kato. Taking the title in 18 minutes and 57 seconds, it would be a Joshi title change in Singapore. Not the first time that it would happen, as Joshi is quite big all over the Pacific Rim, but for Satomura and Kato, it would be the sign of things to come. They were about to take on the world, and the person to give them that opportunity, bizarrely enough, was Eric Bischoff. WCW in 1996 was just about to wind up to something big. However, they had hours and hours of TV time to fill. Having hit big with their deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling, Eric went back to the land of the rising sun to try and pull together another deal, this time for female workers. Bischoff was very smart when he came to tapping into different genres of wrestling. And while he takes his lumps of some of his decisions at the height of WCW's success, you have to give the devil his due when it comes to scouring the world for top talents. The deal with GAEA meant the debut of some of their hottest roster members. Specifically, Bischoff wanted Chigusa Nagaya herself, who debuted as a new heel character called Zero, Akira Hokuto, who will be managed by Sonny Ono, and join Bull Nakano in his stable of Japanese talents. Also joining them will be Toshi Uematsu, Malaya Hisaka, and Sonoka Kato for TV tapings at WCW Worldwide. It's hard to believe that some of the most intense wrestlers that ever lived, Hokuto especially, could find their way to the most sterile wrestling environment of all time. Universal Studios, Florida. WCW's recording pattern, weeks and weeks of endless taping that clogged up everything from pay-per-views to TV storylines, was often noted for not being a natural viewing experience. Putting matches in front of a non-fee-paying, non-wrestling fan audience required a lot of hard work from the wrestlers to make the action stick. While it wasn't the best place to be as a wrestler, it sure did make you think fast and work hard. Of course, going alongside the lack of fire in the fans was Bobby Heenan's less than progressive commentary, and Tony Schiavone phoning it in week on week. However, Satomura was a hit. Fans took to her. She had graduated up to her bespoke ring gear, a sure sign of investment in a wrestler, and she had developed her moveset and presence. She was slightly miscast as the ever-smiling, just happy to be here rookie, but she was over. A match against Malaya Hosaka in November of '96 was a case in point. Very vigorously clapped aboard by the centre stage crowd, who, contrary to the Universal Studios, were incredibly smart, often too smart for WCW's own good. She stood out. Hosaka's traditional Japanese heel approach with Ono calling the shots from ringside did not do her any favours. Not that she was bad, but it was a typecast character. Satomura's character, who was often distracted by her own cheerleading, did great, but talent will out. Her frog splash finisher was also there. Impressive and accurate. What caused all of the females in WCW a problem was a lack of time to have their matches, often clocking in at under 2 minutes. And obviously, is still a problem many top female stars will talk about today. They did not have the time they needed to get the story told the way they wanted to, especially when they're used to getting matches of 20 minutes and upwards in their main events. As Satomura was a hit and the other women of GAEA made an impression, 2 championships were formed. A women's heavyweight and a cruiserweight division were put into play. Satomura would be in the heavyweight division first, understandably going out to the AJW legend and then recent GAEA signee Akira Hokuto on a TV taping for WCW Pro at Disney MGM in December of '96. This was quite the investment by WCW at the time, and a first round match of Uematsu versus Satomura in the Cruiserweight division got things going. Uematsu was also young and a long way away from the persona that would make her famous. However, there they were, in a championship tournament for a title on Monday Nitro. As Larry Zbyszko tied himself in knots on commentary, Uematsu gave an unabridged version of the GAEA main event style. Heavy, hard-hitting wrestling. The world of difference between Nitro and WCW Saturday Night was also abundantly clear. The casual audience of Nitro, while nowhere near as complacent about the product as the Universal Studio audience, were not as clued in as the centre stage crowd. Satomura didn't get quite the reaction required and the match kind of fell on deaf ears. Uematsu took the round and it would be back to square one for Meiko in WCW. In fact, that would signify the end of the women's division being taken seriously in WCW at all. Soon the NWO would be in full swing. The Monday Night War was heating up and the division plummeted from sight. However, there was still GAEA to be concerned about, and by now Satomura was a bona fide mid-card fixture. With the acquisition of Hokuto and Toshiya Yamada from AJW, the viability of the company was there for all to see. Hokuto would also become a long-term opponent and nemesis for Satomura. In fact, Satomura and Hokuto were very much alike in their career path if nothing else. Two naturally intense performers who started and shone from a young age. They would both lead their classes in respective dojos, also from a very young age. But their wrestling philosophy was well matched. Realism and strong narratives were the key to their success, and they found each other to be ideal opponents. Satomura and Hokuto met for the first time in 1996, Hokuto ringing out the winner in 11 minutes and 57 seconds. However, it was something to build on, and their tempestuous relationship, Hokuto the invading heel, Satomura the GAEA true believer, would make a great long-form narrative for the next few years of GAEA's existence, something they could always fall back on and gave Satomura a benchmark to aim for in her career as far as the fans were concerned. It would be returned to time and time again as Hokuto was the model opponent for her. Japanese fans would not be the only ones privy to their special kind of magic. Their next match would be on American soil as the final of the WCW Women's Championship. The success continued as well throughout '97, still riding high as a tag team champions with Kato. They would defend them twice again in that year. But as the veterans of other companies started flooding GAEA, it would be slowly going, trying to crack the main event scene. Ayumi Ozaki came in from JWP and established herself as a top heel with her Oz Academy stable, forming an awkward alliance with Hokuto. With the master rule breaker like Ozaki in the scene, it changed the game. Interference, gang warfare, and avoiding the chair shots became the order of the day, and Satomura held her own, but she was clawing by her fingernails to the main event. The tag team with Kato was no sideshow either. When Las Kakaharas Orientales, Tsukimito and Mima Shimoda turned up on the day of release from All Japan Women, there was only one choice to face them when it came to a dream match scenario: Kato and Satomura. GAEA's sublime dojo pairing against the most dominant tag team in women's wrestling, a dream match for all concerned. At the aptly titled Wild Times event at Korakuen Hall, they would go at it on the 15th of January 1998. It may well have been a non-title match, but to everyone in that building, an awful lot was at stake. Kato and Satomura represented everything that GAEA's system had to offer, and were two of its finest examples. LCO were the AJW Superclass of '87, one dojo year group that had provided more potential than any other, anywhere in wrestling history, and whose graduates had spread themselves thickly around the wrestling world. When their mentor, Akira Hokuto, had left AJW for GAEA, they had come into their own, and they were a huge draw for AJW. They dressed like the noblemen of the 19th century. They came armed with chairs and chains. They could both wrestle a streak. Mita was especially innovative, and Shimoda was born to the job of being a heel. The young guns from GAEA would learn a lot. But what would they come up with? Exactly what dream matches are all about. Satomura and Kato knew what the LCO were all about as well. They jumped them from the belt with a roar of approval from the pro GAEA crowd. Using their shoot-style double teams, the hybrid offense to good effect, they cornered Shimoda and set to work taking the early advantage. However, LCO would go about their business in the best way they knew how, taking it to the outside and using full advantage of GAEA's relaxed, brawling rule set and the 20 count. Chairs, guardrails and wrestlers would start flying around the ringside area as two of the toughest brawlers in the business set about teaching the young up-and-comers a lesson.
Kato would be a victim of the LCO table piledriver as they hurled the referee through the ropes and Meita drove Kato headfirst through a table in the middle of the ring. Shimoda would take over, grounding the young GAEA grappler. She would be split open and bleeding heavily for the rest of the match. Meita took over and delivered another piledriver, pulling Kato up on 2.5 as Satmoura just about managed to get to her feet from the previous beating. This was a lesson in humiliation as far as LCO were concerned, as they planned to make it a long night for the young champions. Shimoda piled on the pressure by chin-locking Kato just out of the reach of her partner and biting into her already bleeding forehead. Kato just about recovered enough to give a stunning series of kicks and headbutts before tagging in Satmoura and collapsing on the mat. Satmoura came in with a fire and started slinging forearms at Shimoda, who would end up slumped in a corner on the receiving end of some vicious-looking headbutts. The physical differences were striking. The statuesque Shimoda down by the petite but powerful Satmoura. It told a tale in itself. The look on Satmoura's face told another. How dare you come to our house and treat us this way? Meita was itching to be in and took over on Satmoura when she got the chance, wanting to deliver her Death Valley bomb as quickly as possible. Satmoura countered with a climb over her opponent into a sunset flip. Not only was this gripping stuff and eminently watchable, it was also going hell for leather. At 7 minutes in, both teams were looking for finishes, but they were not done yet. Shimoda shook off Satmoura's own Death Valley bomb attempt and countered with a power driver and a suplex, but Kato had recovered enough to make the save. With disdain, Meita threw Satmoura into Kato's corner and she tagged in, looking to humiliate the pair of them. But Kato was in no mood for disrespect and got into the veteran's face. She also got back into the bout, delivering stiff shots but to no avail. Meita stood there like the Rock of Gibraltar and tagged in Shimoda. She ran Kato's open wound along the top rope and had time to kick out at Chigusa Nagayo, who was seconding the GAEA team. Satmoura dived in to save a friend, but the punishment continued. LCO upped the ante by bringing in a cheese grater to work on Kato's wound, and in return Satmoura was handed a bucket and it used it to decimate Shimoda while Kato kicked away at her like she was trying to fell a tree. Shimoda came up biting into Kato's leg to distract her, while Meita tossed her preferred pink chair. She felt the two women with stiff shots to the head, and then pinned Kato, but again she lifted her on 2.5, making it clear they would deliver punishment, and nothing else, to stop GAEA's future dead in its tracks. Meita tagged in, but her cockiness got the better of her. Kato tagged out, and with Satomura delivered some of her hammer blows to the pride of AJW's tag division. Then they went a step too far. Satomura missed her frog splash and ate Meita's often taped up knees. However, the referee refused to count a top rope foot stomp assisted by a pastel blue chair on Satomura. LCO took it to the outside with a Shimoda tope con hilo, and Meita Plancha sealed the deal with a pile of humanity on the ringside floor as the four went up into the K-Hall fans. Upon their return, and despite some gallant chair shots from Kato, they would both bind themselves under Shimoda's trademark railguard delivered from the top rope as the referee looked on in dismay, refusing to count anything that wasn't legal. Then there was some innovation. Satomura had established early in her career her ability to apply a cross-arm breaker from any angle. As Shimoda lifted her for an electric chair suplex from the second rope, Satomura followed her down and applied the lock to the roar of approval from the crowd. As they hit the floor, several well-placed Shimoda chair swings got her off. Satomura had the hold hooked in tight and Shimoda wasn't able to give a full swing, she would hurt Meita. A sweet little narrative moment amongst the LCO-inspired violent lunacy that was this bout. Shimoda swung a little too much when Meita was up though, missing Satomura and clobbering her partner. Satomura picked her up for the Death Valley bomb and hit it square in the middle of the ring, but Shimoda managed to make the save. By this point, all four women were selling from their knees. The match had gone at such a terrific pace, what else could they do? Kato got a spinning wheel kick from the top rope directly into Meita's face, but Meita blocked her dragon suplex attempt. Shimoda came back in, but lost momentum straight away, and Meita had to even things up with yet another chair shot. As she looked on unsuccessfully for her Death Valley driver, Kato kept defending herself. However, Shimoda would not be denied, and Satomura was forced to make the save again. In a stunning turnaround, Satomura managed to get rid of the chair that LCO had been using and bought enough time for Kato to deliver sliced bread. She took a chair shot to the back from Meita, but shook it off long enough to deliver a dragon suplex for another two. LCO came back with a powerbomb from the top rope. Satomura saved that. No one team being able to make their numbers advantage count when they had one opponent down. Their variation of the Doomsday device, instead of using electric chair, Meita held her opponent in the powerbomb position to give it some extra force on the way down. They still only garnered a 2 count. Eventually, though, experience gave out. Meita delivered a powerbomb, and in a smooth succession, a Shimoda moonsault sealed the win for the veteran team. 3 trainees held the Satmoura back as the referee declared LCO the winners, but with 20-minute main event performance against the toughest team in the industry, Kaito and Satmoura were made women. Those first 2 years with GAEA were where Meiko Satomura we know today was forged. The high-level visitors, the travel to other companies and countries, the pressure of her peers, and the long days of training the next generation of GAEA wrestlers in the dojo she would become the head trainer for, as well as the guidance of Chigusa Nagayo, would cover that initial impetus. What happened next in her career would fuel her long after GAEA closed its doors. She would enter the elite of wrestlers that was a sustained draw in the diminishing world of Joshi, one of its key architects on its road to revival. Read about that next time in Yesterday's Hero, the Meiko Satomura Story Part 2, Scorpio Rising. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Telling Stories today, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to The Truepenny Show. My name's James Truepenny. You can find me at Sheriff Lone Star on Twitter and on Blue Sky. You can join me at Sheriff Lone Star on TX on Instagram, and you can also find the show Truepenny Show on Twitter, Blue Sky and Instagram. Take care, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.